Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of the Daily Crypto Byte. For those of you that were missing us last week, apologies. We did one live show from Vegas, but other than that, we are, meeting and greeting some people at the conference. I see you guys in the comments here already this morning. Josh Singh, it was a pleasure meeting you. Janine, pleasure meeting you as well. Caesar, pleasure meeting you and your wife. You guys were all so awesome. It really was, a pleasure to meet you guys. And we've got some exciting stuff to showcase today as well. Like we talked about at the conference, sentiment data is now live this morning. If you refresh your browser in the crypto community, that will be available to you. So we'll showcase that and a lot more today. So before we dive into things, CJ, how you doing today?
Doing pretty well, Monty. Rested up, great weekend. Just would echo, what you said earlier about it being such a pleasure meeting so many of the community members. You guys are really great. Also, some interesting price action in Bitcoin. We haven't had a whole lot, but it's pretty favorable, the fact that we're consolidating above that previous resistance level at about 47, 46K. So we can dive into the charts in a little bit here. There's also some interesting stuff on chain, so we can cover all of that and more.
Yeah, and one thing that's pretty interesting, CJ, we talked a lot about that at the conference, that sort of run up from 40 to 48K, and how we had some staunch resistance at that 48K level. But I would agree, I'm very encouraged by the fact we didn't get an immediate reversal. We seem to be consolidating right around that price range. Very encouraging signs for the short to long term. So I'm encouraged for this week, but let's dive into some charts and see what they're showing.
Let's do it. So just going to start off here with a couple new features on the platform. You have the ability to expand the watch list like this, and there are a lot of new sentiment indicators that you can check out and add to the watch list. If you go up here to the gear icon, you will see over 15 new indicators in there in which you can just drag and drop into the watch list. Go ahead and hit close, and then you will see that new metric within the watch list. So super cool about that. We're going to be really doing a lot of research and trying to figure out how to use these most optimally. But as of now, we just wanted to give them to you guys and, experiment, see if there's certain things that are interesting or certain correlations. One of the ones that Monty had talked about previously that I've kind of taken a liking to as well is the relative social volume compared to the 30-day average. If I compress some of these, and so that one is somewhat interesting. BSV negative 100%, comp negative 10%. Relatively interesting. So I encourage you guys to explore those and let us know what you think. But overall, like I had said previously, we are consolidating here at a nice resistance level, which bodes well because typically the more you test a particular level, the weaker it's going to get in theory. So, all right. And this level that I was mentioning has to do right with that previous lower high that we formed approximately at 48K. But now that we've actually had the 20 smooth moving average flip from resistance, we've been able to break above that level and should now form as support before potentially building momentum for a further climb into the 50,000s. So, it's really nice that we are consolidating at that level. Even if we remain relatively flat for the next couple days, I think that's fine because it really, from a technical perspective, it outlines and satisfies the conditions for that inverse head and shoulders pattern. Talked about this at the conference as well, kind of the left shoulder, then forming the head. You have a very consistent volume profile that would make up an inverse head and shoulders pattern. Now we're just kind of waiting for a consolidation before a potential strike in volume to ultimately form the right shoulder. So I think that's pretty interesting. Also, if we zoom out a little bit on some of these oscillators, we can see that they are actually turning up for some of the first times ever since we kind of rolled over and had that mini period of sell-off a couple weeks back. But now we can see the oscillators are turning up, providing positive momentum, and are not really overbought in any sense of the word, going into a relatively medium resistance level. So I like our chances of breaking above it here in the coming weeks. Also, I like to highlight the supply shock indicator because it keeps getting higher and higher, foreshadowing further bullish price action. And so I just want to go through a couple instances of history here and what's happened after we've reached this green level. This is really an optimal time to buy, or has been an optimal time to buy historically. A lot of times when we see the supply shock increase to these levels, we're followed by very strong rallies. And this is what many have led to call Shocktober. And I'm pretty optimistic, but we shall see. The only time we really didn't get a immediate parabolic rally after we reached very high supply shock territory was the COVID black swan right here. And if we didn't have that drop off as a result of COVID, I do believe this would have turned into a much more natural rally. And perhaps that COVID black swan event did delay our run up to 60K by, a month or so. Nevertheless, I think unless we have some type of similar black swan events, which we really can't predict as of now, I do think that this is very, very bullish going into October and Q4. We've been really reiterating that point about how Q4, specifically in Bitcoin bull markets, has been extraordinarily bullish throughout the years. Also, one of my favorite indicators, the Bitcoin difficulty ribbon, has to do with Bitcoin miners and difficulty on the network. So typically what we see is a lot of miners really selling because they have to go off of the network. And when they do that, they force sell pressure on the markets, and we see them leaving the network. And this moving average of the Bitcoin difficulty ribbon ultimately flipping over. And so overall, throughout time, if we go all the way back, even to the days like 2013 and 2014, these instances where we see a massive overlap in the Bitcoin difficulty ribbon, and then miners then return to the network, it shows that that sell pressure is pretty much being eradicated. And so now we finally have a lot more of those miners coming back on the network officially after the great migration out of China. So pretty interesting stuff. Just thought I'd share those. I really like always looking at the miner difficulty ribbon, as well as some of those other on-chain metrics as well. But it's looking pretty favorable, I would say so.
It is looking very favorable, CJ, especially for this Q4 performance. I think a lot of things that you talked about while we were presenting at the conference in terms of accumulation and distribution are going to be the driving factors in this Q4 rally. So very encouraged by the fact that whales are still accumulating. We're seeing them continue to accumulate even after that move to 48K, which I think bodes very well for the end of the year here. But I see some questions in the chat, and I want to hit them real quickly from some members about our new sentiment data. And although we will have a video kind of tutorial coming out later in an email, as well as being posted to the site, I will just quickly dive in and explain some of these metrics a little bit further, because they are pretty novel metrics. And, we talked about how at the conference, one piece of the puzzle is technical analysis. Another piece of the puzzle is fundamental analysis or on-chain analysis, like CJ was just doing. Now, the third and final piece of the puzzle would be sentiment data. And we have added a few different metrics here to take a look at. So Janine asks about positivity. And positivity, you need to look at it like, sentiment is like volume, in the sense that not all volume is in the same direction. And it's the same with sentiment. Some of it is positive and some of it is negative. So our sentiment engine is designed to analyze the context with which a crypto ticker is mentioned. So if TRX is being mentioned in a positive context, like with words like buy or bull or moon or whatever it may be, that increases the weight of the positive score. However, if it's being associated with negative words, like sell or dump, whatever it may be, that will result in a negative score. So this is a more directional sentiment score. Now CJ talked about this one a little bit, and this part is my favorite in particular, at least so far. And that's because I think that with the low cap assets, the relative social volume is a great indication of where the buzz is at. With these sort of low cap alts, they are so driven by retail participation in the market. So whenever we have a pop in, buzz or in mentions on social media, whether it be on Twitter or Reddit, that's worth noting because it tends to precede the price action that is associated with that mania. So as you can see here, relative social volume, certain assets are being mentioned more than others. And if we take a look at, what that looks like on the chart, you can see here, quantum been performing very well over the last 5 days, starting to pull back now, but um, a lot of that is on the back of positive sentiment. So interesting stuff in our new watch list. We encourage you to check that out. And, we're going to continue to refine this, continue to add more metrics as we see fit. But we are very, very excited about it.
Baby steps. It's a constant process of refinement and then eventually bringing it to the equities and options space. But also, there's a little drop down arrow next to all of those sentiment indicators in the watch list. If you want to get a short definition of what they consist of, you can check that out. But of course, we will have more education on those coming. One bit of news that I wanted to mention has to do with Congress as well, specifically with several members penning a letter to our Fed chairman, Jerome Powell, urging him to support crypto innovation. And so, who knows what he'll actually do with this or make of it. But I think it's positive in the sense that more members of power in Congress have to answer to their constituents, and their constituents are clearly telling them that we don't want to disrupt, or we don't want to kill disruptive innovation. We want to support it so our country can flourish from this economic opportunity that's occurring with all the wealth that is truly being created in the crypto space. So just thought I'd mention that there. Pretty interesting stuff.
Yeah, very interesting stuff and very important stuff. I was in my Uber on my way to the airport when we were leaving Vegas, and my driver was asking me about crypto because I said we were here for a finance conference and we focus on crypto. And one thing she asked me is, what is the biggest potential hurdle for crypto? And I talked about, regulational clarity. I think that is one of the biggest hurdles to overcome. And I think that's one thing that's keeping a lot of participants on the sideline right now is just a lack of regulational clarity, because it does feel like, whether it be from SEC Chairman Gary Gensler or Jerome Powell, it does feel like there's this impending hammer that's just looming over our heads. But the great thing about it is, like you just pointed out, CJ, there's been uh, pressure from Congress and, crypto advocates all across the world to make these regulations right so that they don't stifle innovation in the space. And as long as that happens, I expect regulation to be a very positive thing for this space. I expect it to bring in lots of new capital that has been, a little bit nervous and waiting for this clarity to come. And, once it seems like we're getting very, very close to that point. So, regulation takes a while. It's a very slow moving process. But given what we're seeing from the SEC and the Fed, it is looking relatively encouraging. So, exciting stuff there as well. But any particular doges of the day today, CJ? I know there are some assets that are ripping to the upside. Real quick, I just want to talk about this one here, and that is Luna. We talked about Luna a little bit last week as well. Luna is one of those assets that has really strong backing from some strong players. People like Mike Novogratz. The Terra Alliance is very, very popular. And one thing that I think is very encouraging is the ability for Luna to show strength into market weakness. And this is something that you see in assets that get speculation from both sides of the table, from both retail and institutional. So another asset that sees this similar dynamic would be Solana. And because of that, inflows of capital from multiple directions, from both the retail and institutional side, it allows these assets to rally even when the market isn't showing particular strength. So, Luna, very interesting stuff here, rallying strong to start the week. The volume profile is looking very, very good as well. So might be worth watching here as it approaches new all-time highs at the $50 level.
Thank you for that, sir. I will get to my Doge of the day, but something that I forgot to mention earlier when I was doing the initial Bitcoin analysis was the weekly chart, because we had a very strong weekly close yesterday night. And I actually do want to go over that because I think it's quite significant to the overall macro trend. It's one of the first bullish engulfing candles we've seen on the weekly chart in quite some time. So if we see this, one thing that I had talked about very briefly with a post in chat last week, kind of before we left for the conference, was when we were testing the support here, because it looked pretty negative. A lot of technical analysts were saying, we're probably going into the symmetrical triangle, likely to break higher. But right now, we've held that support from the previous resistance at 20K or 40K rather, and we flipped it from resistance to now new support in the macro trend. So that's incredibly promising. I love longing bullish engulfing candles when we're at the bottom of a downtrend like that. Still seeing convergence in the oscillators, still seeing strength from that macro perspective. And it looks as if we're just about to break above the downward sloping trend line, which is really coming in from the full high there. So if we are to break out, I mean, look out for Shocktober. Things could get very interesting here going into the fall and the mid start through Q4. But one thing that I want to mention, a project, not necessarily a Doge of the day, but something I just want to put on your guys' radar. And this was introduced to me by one of our members, George. And after doing some research and taking a look at it, it's a pretty interesting project. Very new here on the daily chart, as you can see. A lot of price action, but it's gone all the way from about 2 cents to 11 cents. And it is a gaming project known as Gala. So this is not necessarily like Engine, but it's a blockchain where you can make games and then you can have, cross game items that individuals can actually sell. Say, you get a very rare Fortnite skin or something of that sort. Not will you just have it within the game, but you'll actually be able to trade it and sell it over time. So it makes collectibles and the aspect of collectibles now applicable to the digital realm as well. Monty, I think we're also talking with George about physical gaming collectibles and video games from like the 1980s or 1990s that were in mint condition that hadn't been opened. Those are extremely rare and collectible for certain individuals. So if you can have that same idea with community and then apply it to a digital landscape, that is something that I think could be very popular. And you know, can we really explain it as humans? I mean, it's purely subjective value. Who else would collect, a 25-year-old video game? Not judging or anything. I'm just saying it's phenomenally interesting, and you never know what humans are going to place subjective value on, which I think is a beautiful thing.
Very well said, CJ. And I thought it was really cool to kind of see the, you know, interest in NFTs while we were at the conference. Lots of people were coming up to me asking about NFTs, asking about various applications of NFTs. And, people do often refer to it as a bubble, a speculative bubble, but, there is so much excitement around it. I think people recognize that concept of digital scarcity, applies to many things that we already place a lot of value on in everyday life. So it was really cool chatting with some of you guys. Some of you guys are collectors like me as well. We were talking about, baseball cards and those sorts of ventures into NFTs. So really interesting stuff. And it does not seem like the NFT hype is going anywhere anytime soon.
Absolutely, really learned a lot from you guys. I mean, it was such a rewarding experience, and it seems like we've had a lot of quality feedback. So it looks like you guys had enjoyed most of it as well. So all the better. But don't forget, if you'd like to see more of our insights, have some access to this new sentiment data, as well as see beyond just the Doge of the day, but into more of Monty and I's picks, you can check it out for 7 days for just $7 now at the link below at markerrebellion.com/try crypto. We have our mobile app as well, as you'll see in the top right corner just above me. And don't forget, if you like that service and you'd like to share that information with a friend who also could benefit from it, don't forget you have the option to refer a friend. And if you'll get $25 for each friend that you refer, and they will also get $25 off of their first month subscription. So we really appreciate that. Also want to say a thank you to Voyager, as well as Steve Ehrlich being at the conference, really laying out a lot of great stuff for the Voyager roadmap and this broker dealer that Market Rebellion and Voyager are, continuing on. So we're very excited for all that has to come. I think there was also a little bit of mention of Fundstrat data potentially being added to the Voyager app, Fundstrat research. And if any of you guys follow Tom Lee, you'll know that his research is always very well done, very in depth, very high attention level of attention to detail. So all the better. A lot of good stuff going on there. Any
Yeah,
final words, Monty?
that's another great thing that came out of the conference. You get Steve and Tom Lee in the same room and Dirk in the same room. They start making things happen. So exciting stuff. One thing I would like to say, our weekly webinar typically is on Wednesdays. This week, we're going to do it tomorrow at 11:30 Central Time. We're going to be walking through how to use the sentiment data, what we watch for in terms of the sentiment data, what type of things are feeding into that sentiment data, and then we'll apply it in some, real-time technical analysis for you guys. So as always, an email will be going out with a link to that webinar, and we'll also be posting that link in the chat. So that's all I got for today. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. We appreciate it, and we will see you again tomorrow. Have a great rest of your day, and take care.